welcome everyone. I'm just hitting these last few, admitting people into the waiting room. We're going to have people coming in, obviously, these next few minutes. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kyle Graham, Associate Head of School at Poly. And as we get this going, this is really an exciting event for us. It's something we just started this year, and it really was born out of in helping our kids navigate the college process. Oftentimes they don't realize the different kinds of paths that they can have as adults after school. They think it's very linear. And tonight, certainly, I remember speaking to Dr. Tehrany when I first met him about his path and being involved in the arts and obviously medicine, and thinking, wow, I wish kids knew that it doesn't have to be so direct. You can do, you can pursue multiple interests for the rest of your life. And so we're really excited about that. My colleague, Opiemi Lanianu, is going to introduce the evening, and we're just so thankful that you're all here. We are recording this event, so we know that kids' schedules, when there's Zoom fatigue and all that sort of thing. So it is something that we hope is available for kids to take advantage of, like their favorite Netflix show, later on. So Opiemi?
Thank you, Kyle. Again, my name is Opiemi Lanianu. I'm the Director of Annual Giving here at Poly Prep in my first year. I'm so grateful to be here with our guests today, and I'm excited for our night ahead. I have the pleasure of introducing Minya O and Dr. Tehrany, starting with Minya. Minya O, aka Miss Info, is one of the most respected journalists in hip hop culture, whether on air, in print, or online. She launched her career as a writer during the heyday of music magazines like The Source, Vibe Magazine, Double XL Magazine, Rolling Stone, and more. Magazines I'm sure a lot of you kids don't even know exist, to be quite frank. Even as a teenage magazine intern writing under a pseudonym, Minya penned some of hip hop's most historic album reviews. From Nas's Illmatic to Biggie's Ready to Die. Years later, Minya would move to MTV News and then to New York's iconic radio station, Hot 97 FM, where she developed on-air persona as Miss Info, settling the barometer for hip-hop news for the next decade with her hourly reports. During that time, Miss Info also created an eponymous music website, Miss Info TV, where she and her staff posted exclusive nearly 24 hours a day, talking with established stars like 50 Cent, or tracking the rise of then newcomers, Drake, Travis Scott, Nicki Minaj, and more. As a pioneering female and Asian American presence in the hip hop industry, Miss Info broke through many barriers and now loves to use her experiences to mentor other aspiring journalists. Over the years, she's been featured on NPR, BuzzFeed, Jezebel, the New York Times, Hip Hop Evolution, and more. After retiring from radio in 2015, Minya joined her husband and their partners in launching the luxury sneaker consignment site, Stadium Goods. If you're a sneakerhead, you're all about this. But her full-time boss is her 5-year-old son, Max. Thank you, Minya, for joining us.
I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I mean, that bio was like very press releasey. Thank you guys all for sitting through that. I'm just a hip hop head who is now a sneaker head, and also a mom. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Our second guest, Dr. Armin Tehrany, is a New York City orthopedic surgeon, founder of Manhattan Orthopedic Care, and film producer. He attended Poly Prep Country Day School for 8 years and graduated in 1987. After receiving his combined undergraduate and medical degree from the New York University School of Medicine, he completed his residency in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Lenox Hill Hospital in Manhattan. During that time, he worked with a team of physicians from the New York Jets, New York Rangers, and New York Islanders. He then completed an orthoscopic shoulder surgery fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Tehrany is currently in private practice and serves as a member of the Board of Governors for the New York University School of Medicine. Is an assistant clinical professor of orthopedic surgery at Mount Sinai, and is an honorary surgeon for the New York City Police Department. In addition, he has served on the Board of Governors for Poly Prep Country Day School. He currently serves on the Board of Directors for the NYU Alumni Association, runs pre-medical internship programs for students at Spence, Poly Prep, NYU, and other institutions. And his wife, Valerie Laurie, is an actress and studied at the William Esper Studio in New York City. Together, they formed Precision Cut Productions for their film business in 2018. Their 2 daughters currently attend Poly Prep classes of 23 and 25. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Opiemi. That's very kind. It's really an honor to be asked to speak, just share my story of the time when I started, at Poly. And I just also want to just start by saying that my best friends in life are from Poly Prep. And it's a lot of how I was raised at Poly that gave me I suppose, just the confidence really to be able to achieve whatever it is that I put my mind to. And so I'd love to share that. Thanks.
So thank you so much. Well, we'll start ladies first. Minya, let's get down to it. What's your story? How did you get to where you are today? And when you're answering that, you can talk about the linear progression of accomplishment this or accomplishment that, but would love to hear some of the things that were going through your head as you found yourself where you are today, successful in the business industry and one of the top sneakerheads in the country.
Wow, that, even just the question is so daunting, because I think that in many ways, Dr. Tehrany is everything that my parents wanted me to be. And I made a lifelong mission of really giving them a lot of heartache and headache in not going that direction. And I think that
that's great.
Part of the journey, one of the things that I finally learned is that the commitment to keep going is really the thing that was the only thing that I had. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a music journalist. I just knew that I was in love with hip hop. It was a music and a culture that I fell in love with when I was in high school. And, as a Korean American girl in the suburbs of Chicago, I was very self-aware. I was aware of the fact that I did not have any rhythm. I could not rap. I could not dance. And so what were my avenues in terms of pursuing this passion? The only guiding principle was the passion. So I think that all throughout, whether it was writing letters, just begging to get a job as an intern at various magazines, and yes, kids, like, magazines were it. That was the only way that you could kind of participate, track, understand, and like contribute to hip hop culture in the 90s. And so I just kept, asking anybody that would listen to me, can I get a job? I didn't get paid. It was the time of my life. I was also in undergrad at Columbia University, but it didn't really matter to me. I didn't pay attention to my schooling. That's not something that I'm encouraging. Kyle, please don't have a heart attack. But yeah, it was just all about the passion. I just knew that I loved this culture and I wanted to be involved. And I wanted to be involved in a really productive, real way. I didn't want to just be an observer. I wanted to contribute. And so I think the only way that I was able to do it was to become the watcher, the writer, the person who kind of sets it down so that there's a history of what's happening in this culture. And it was such a vibrant time. And as we know now, hip hop is the single most important and sort of evocative culture in modern times. I mean, it's literally moved the world. So I think that the only other thing that I had besides the passion was a lot of inbred discipline. And that I think I really attribute to having immigrant parents that didn't have a lot of resources, but just said, just work really hard. You have to work twice as hard. And so even when I was doing something that was a little bit unusual, like even though I was working in a hip hop magazine, and that wasn't something that was necessarily on the path, the normal path for someone who was in an Ivy League school or in a normal path for an immigrant child, I was still as dedicated to that as anybody else would be in engineering school or pre-med or anything else. So that meant working really, really hard, paying attention to every single detail, and also kind of staying ahead. So when I saw that magazines were sort of struggling and they weren't keeping up, then I quickly moved to TV and I started writing for TV, and then I moved to radio. And it was just a matter of applying the exact same dedication to different mediums. And as soon as I saw that everybody was more online and people were blogging, then I wanted to do that as well. And it wasn't all about like trying to get a job in each one of these fields. A lot of times, especially as quickly as things are moving in this world, You just have to do it while you're doing 80 other things. And that's the reality. And I think that when Odris always talks about grit, part of grit is being able to take on new responsibilities and new projects that don't necessarily add to your bottom line, but they add to your fulfillment, your personal fulfillment. So that's what I kept doing. So once blogging was sort of like reaching its apex, then I joined a blog network. And I don't think that the overall goal was ever fame. The overall goal was, what is the next way that I can keep doing this at the highest level possible and reach the largest amount of people that will listen to me and do the service of doing it accurately. And I think that that's sort of the way that I've kind of kept afloat. And that's sort of been the main motivation.
I'm hearing a lot of, expectation placed on you, but the discipline to take your passions and make it your own and follow that through. This idea of constantly learning, taking on what you want to do based off of those passions, and working twice as hard than anyone else. If you could you in 90 seconds give me your elevator pitch from high school, breaking in from industry to industry, as you talked from going from writing to video to the internet to radio. If you give me that 90 seconds of that evolution of your career, that would be wonderful.
Oh, well, if I stepped into a room and let's say it's the head of Universal Music, or let's say it's Leor Cohen, or it's 50 Cent. No matter who that person was, they knew from within a few minutes of talking to me that I knew my shit. So there was no excuses. There was no, oh, this person doesn't look like the part, because you have to bring the noise. You have to bring exactly what you feel proud about. And for me, it was always knowing all of the information, knowing it better, being more accurate, being accountable. And I think that would apply. It didn't matter whether it was print, TV, radio. I didn't have a single minute of experience on the radio when I started doing the morning show on Hot 97. That's the #1 radio market in the entire country and the #1 radio station in hip hop. I did not have a single day's experience. And there was a lot of pushback on that, but nobody could say she doesn't know what she's talking about. So after that, the experience comes. But if you can't step into that elevator, knowing everything behind your pitch, then nobody will listen to the pitch, is what I would say.
Armin, how does someone become a physician working with some of the top professional sports teams in the state of New York, if not the country? Walk us through that journey and some of the things that were going through your mind, whether it was in high school, college, as you made the decisions that have led you to where you are right now.
Sure. Well, to me, looking at becoming an orthopedic surgeon that could have the access to top level patients like athletes whose demand is really high because it's their livelihood. My attitude wasn't to just get that. It was to just do the best I can to be, honestly, the best in my field. And so it was just an attitude of got to work hard and have to strive, if I'm committed to what it is I want to do and I have a passion for it, to just go as far as I can. And so what I love about where I went to school is that there was an expectation to do the best I can, and it was really well fostered. And so, when you have a group around you that not only believe in you, but can provide what it is that you need and understand your weaknesses, of which I have a lot, it was just wonderful. So it's a little bit of a plug for Poly. And then after that, because I had the tools to go into medicine, and I'll be honest, also my father's a physician, so that was helpful too, and just like Minya was suggesting, having strong parents. My parents are from Iran. We're Persian Jews. For me to have seen what my father and my mother had to go through played a big role in me going to where I want to go. If I ever got complacent, or I wanted to complain that, you know, this is too hard. I have no idea what hard is, no clue. And so, you know, just to continue to persevere, I think also to get to a high level, it's really important to learn the value of authenticity, learn the value of how to communicate in an honest way. And as a physician, you're being trusted with people's lives. They are coming to see you to get your opinion about a field that they don't really know very well. You know, WebMD is not going to really give you the scoop exactly on what your issue is. And even if it does give you a little information, you need a human being to listen to what you're saying, empathize with you, and be able to trust you. So I think it's really important to understand the value of trust. And so when you can realize that that's what's required in that field, obviously you have to be competent. Obviously you have to work hard. You have to do well, but you have to have empathy, and you have to know how to communicate well so that the patients can trust you. If you can get to that level, then the sky's the limit. And a lot of luck involved, I'll tell you. I mean, I spent most of my career in New York City. I was in Brooklyn, then NYU's in Manhattan, did my residency in Manhattan. You know, the more people you get to know that are in your area, the wider your network, and the more chance that you can get to a good place where you can meet the right people. And if you can prove yourself, they'll want to work with you. And so that's really, I think, the key. And, you know, 1,000 friends is enough, one enemy's too many.
What would you say is the best part of what you do? And then added to that, what's the most challenging aspect of your work?
I'd say the best part of what I do is being able to give anyone in any field that I'm working in my weathered opinion, my measured opinion, meaning I can tell people the upsides of what it is that I think they need, and the downsides of what I think I need. And I can just tell them honestly, this is your problem, I think, and if you want to get it fixed, you can be aggressive. These are the benefits and drawbacks of that. You can be conservative. That's okay. These are the benefits and drawbacks of that, and you decide. And I enjoy the ability to have that dialogue and help and let them feel empowered. That I love. That really feels good. And the camaraderie. I'm a people person. I love to be around people. I love to help. And I love the energy of working together. I think the most challenging thing for me is when there is miscommunication, when there is fear that's associated with, can I rely on what he's saying? Is this going to go in a direction I want? I like the challenge, actually, of being able to figure out when I'm working with someone or getting to know someone, what is it that they're not telling me? What is it that they're worried about? What is it that they're fearful of? What is it that they're trying to say and get across? That's a great challenge. And the further up I go, the more excited I am about how to overcome the challenge.
Minya, the same question. The best part of what you do and the most challenging aspect of your work.
Let's see, the best part of what I do. So I think at this point in my career, I do a lot of different things. So I work on my own projects, which are much more media based, but then also I'm the style director for Stadium Goods, and Stadium Goods is a total departure from what I did in the past, but still very deeply connected because it's all part of the same culture. You do not have sneaker culture without hip hop culture. And that connection is really, really vital. Even in the beginning of starting the business, I was really reaching back to all of the artists, all of the people in the industry, and writers, editors, because they were the ones who were really driving and documenting what was happening in the streets, in fashion, in music, and they're all so integrally tied together. So now I think a lot of it is being a connector. You know, on a very base level, I'm getting texts all the time from Gucci Mane and he needs every single pair of a certain style of sneaker in his size, and he needs it like ASAP. So, you know, that's a unique part of my life now. But then on the other side of it, it might be organizing something like a launch of a clothing line, or really supporting like a big event. Like DJ Khaled had a big event, and we basically shut down all of Soho to support it. This is all in the pre-COVID Camelot that we didn't know we were living in. And, you know, it was thousands and thousands of kids all really excited about both Khaled and about sneakers, and just wanting to get together and feel each other's energy. So that was an amazing thing to put together. But I think, like, in general, the connection of people is something that's that I've been doing for a long time anyway. So even as a journalist, I think that you end up becoming somebody, if you do it right, somebody that people trust, to tell you both the good and the bad of what's going on in the culture. And I created a lot of relationships with artists where I almost felt like I was a therapist in some way, because it was a lot of like, this is happening, I think I'm in big trouble, what should I do? And I think that there had to be a fairness in terms of like, well, I do have to report this, so it'll be on the air at 8 p.m. On the Funk Flex show, but also being fair and knowing that like when something is misreported, it will be corrected. So I would say the worst part of my job now is more indicative of the worst part of what I see in the larger culture, which is a lack of responsibility to the truth. The truth is very amorphous now. And there's a lot of like, whoever posts it first, it doesn't necessarily matter whether it's true or false. And I think that that's something that as young people, you guys are all dealing with. You have to become your own internal fact-checking department. And that's something that you didn't have to do before. There's another level to that, which is coming up in the industry. I didn't know that I was living in like the stone ages of equity, diversity, and, you know, gender parity. But I was like, there was some really insane things that I've seen and been through. It actually, by surviving through those and not knowing that, you know, it was so bad, I was able to really create some resilience and be able to like feel like, okay, well, I can basically live through anything. I can survive anything. But I think now there is so much emphasis on what we need things to be that sometimes I think it becomes a burden on young people where they don't feel like they can move forward when things go wrong. And I want hip hop culture in general and the larger culture, youth culture overall, to really empower people so that when something bad happens to you, you don't feel like you can't keep moving past it. You know, you can bear the weight, but you don't have to carry it forever. So I would say like that's kind of like the struggle that I see in my business and overall that I keep wanting to fight the good fight.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna date myself a little bit. So it's you know, a young 19-year-old OPM is logging onto his Zanga page and he's creating a top 50 all-time rap albums, and he comes up with Nas's Illmatic, which actually happened, and he's talking about just how powerful that album is. And he says to himself, man, I want to be part of the culture. I want to be talking with individuals who are, you know, producing and contributing to the scene. I want to be talking and commenting and describing the importance of this music, and I want to be writing in magazines. What are you saying to an OPM or any of our students now, except fast forward a couple of years later and the scene's completely different? What would you say to someone on here who wants to be in a position that you're in, positioning themselves, or things they should be cognizant of?
Well, it's such a different business now, because when my only dream was that I wanted to be a tiny byline in a magazine on a staff of 100, right? And I don't think that anybody has that goal anymore. Everybody wants to be their own headline. and they want to be their own influencer. They want to be on camera. And I think that all of the steps in between sometimes get skipped over, the importance of them. And it's not that it has to take that long, but it's that those steps in between actually fortify your soul for what's going to come at you at the end. So
what are some of those steps in the now?
Well, again, I talked earlier about how knowing your shit really gives you a superpower that people can't break into. And so it's impossible to know everything overnight. So the more time that you take to know both the past of the culture that you're into, the current and the future, you kind of fortify yourself so that anytime somebody comes to challenge you, you're ready. And I would say, like, when it comes to writing, it used to be that I would have to like collect a whole bunch of clips and then I would have like, you know, my portfolio and I would present it to an editor, and that's like the past, that's old news. Nowadays, all of you guys who are interested in becoming writers or influencers or on camera personalities, every single day is adding to your portfolio, and your tweets are adding to your portfolio, but in a way that's also very, very important to note. They don't disappear. So you have to be very careful, and you have to be very considerate about what you're putting out into the universe, because it reflects back on you forever and ever and ever. And the thing is, don't discount how important it is. I know someone who is, an Emmy-winning writer for Samantha Bee, and his writing portfolio was Twitter. He literally handed in a bunch of his tweets. They were all commentary on current news, and he got a job because there's a lot of open-ended sort of casting, and he ended up winning an Emmy. So don't discount how each small statement that you're making impacts the world.
Armin, to be responsible for the conditioning and health of a human life, I think, is one of the most incredible professions and positions to be in. To get yourself to that point, the discipline, of course, which you mentioned, but the sacrifice and the belief in yourself. How does one, if you're a student here, get to the position where you've got people's careers, livelihoods, their to some extent, their well-being in your hands? How do you position yourself to a point where they're in your shoes right now?
So I want to start by saying I was really moved by what Minya just said. It's so important now for kids in this generation to understand that it's not so important that you become famous. It's important that you accomplish and that you feel good about what you have accomplished. If it's authentic, okay, and if it's honorable, that's how you get known. That's how you get quote unquote famous, maybe not on a large scale, but in your own community. So that's what I've wanted. So going up the ladder, I had to sacrifice a lot because I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I was really, really young. I was 7, and my immigrant parents would say, "Oh, do you want to be a doctor?" And I'd say, "Okay." And then they'd say, "Well, your dad's a doctor." And honestly, it wasn't that I wanted to necessarily be a doctor, is that I wanted to be like my dad. He came over from another country. He brought a lot of family over. He took care of them. He operated on people. He saved lives. I said, this guy's amazing. I want to be like him. And in order to be like him, I had to be honorable. I had to work hard. I had to do the right thing. I mean, this man could serve on ethics committees. And so the process of being able to get to where I would get, I knew was a very long road. And I was lucky because I was able to make that decision early that I wanted to pursue that path. So by being focused and, sacrificing to make sure that I knew what I needed to do in order to achieve the goals that I need to achieve, I was able to get there. So I sang in a rock band in high school. I played in the theater so that I could be well-rounded and do other stuff other than I played sports. But I knew that passion of being able to be an artist I couldn't do if I wanted to be a physician simultaneously. And so I kept the artist in me, and I highly recommend to the audience, whatever it is that you're going to do, be involved in the arts in some way, shape, or form, because it's the art that moves the world. The movies, the music, those are things that change the world and move the world, okay? And physicians are artists. Medicine is an art. It's not a science. We try to make it scientific, but it's the art of healing others and knowing how to talk to them and knowing how to communicate and knowing how to understand. Do you have to know your stuff? Yeah. So that's the hard work that you got to put in. So yes, you got to get the good grades, but more important than that, I think, is you've got to be a good citizen. You've got to demonstrate to yourself and others all throughout your upbringing that you're a good, decent person. And like Minya was saying, it's harder to know what the truth is these days. Well, I think those who are at Poly understand what's good. And it's important to understand both sides of what's good, not just one side. And so it was just put my head down, work hard, listen a lot and talk less, I would say, was really helpful, to be able to, I see a lot of talking going on in society now, but I don't see as much listening. That I think is important in order to be able to get to where you are. Because if you listen more, other people who are there understand that you're listening. And then when it's your turn, you expect them to listen.
Something that, we're trying to kind of impress upon our students and the individuals on the screen is the idea of a mentor, yes, but a sponsor, yes, as well. Can you talk about a mentor that was in your life that helped you get to where you are now, but then also talk about a sponsor based off of work or things that you've done that kind of promoted you or advocated for you or put their name on you because of what you had accomplished, and kind of talk about how that mentor and how that sponsor affected your progression to where you are now. Armin.
Okay. So my mentor started as early as at Poly. I took AP Bio as a sophomore. It was in I think they have it now, the SAP program, Special Advanced Program. So I was pretty scared because it was really hard level as a sophomore for me to take biology, but the Professor Sandra Stone was just an absolute superstar, amazing woman who really worked me really hard and made me realize that I could step up if I needed to. And she made it clear she believed in me. And it was because of her, actually, that I decided, I can actually do this. She kicked my ass. And, I got my C+ in the first quarter and I was devastated. And she said, well, you got to work harder. You got to do more. She said to my mom a few years later, Armin's charm alone is not going to get him ahead in life. He's got to do the work. He's got to do the work. You've got to focus and do what you need to do. And so grades went up and I said, wow, I can make this happen. And she was my mentor all the way until she died. And then, along the way in college, I had my college guidance counselor. But I got to be honest, OPMA, a lot of it was also fellow students that were a year or two ahead of me that said to me, hey, listen, because I was in a 7-year med program. So there were some kids ahead of me that I befriended and I asked for guidance. And they said, hey, listen, this is how you get through. This is how you make it work. This is what you got to do if you want to make it. Same in medical school. I had orthopedic professors that I sought out. I had some friends through Staten Island that helped me get to where I am. And so that's one of the reasons why I love the mentoring, because I wouldn't have gotten anywhere on my own. Nobody does. So I like to pay it forward. And that's really valuable. So I would say, there's certain people along each way in each path. And if you're lucky, and it's important to seek those people out. If you find someone who you look up to and moves you and inspires you, tell them, say, I really appreciate what you're doing. Can I shadow you? Can you guide me? And you have nothing to lose, because the worst that they're going to say is, I don't have time. And be persistent, because they'll like that. And that persistence will get them to come back and say, all right, fine. You can shadow me. And it's the greatest thing, man. We're nowhere without our mentors.
Minya, same question.
When I'm thinking about mentors, Not to be contrary, but I have to say that I think that in my particular career, I've pretty much felt like an alien in at many stages. Because when I started in hip hop magazines, there were very few women. I was a girl. There were no Asian Americans, none. And it was to the point when I started writing, I was an intern, but I was assigned really big assignments, and I had to write under a pen name that was non-gendered. So it was just Shorty. It was no gender, no ethnicity, no clues into who was behind the pen. And it was because everyone kind of knew that no one would even read what I was writing and accept it if they knew who I was. So there were some really funny moments where really upset rappers would call the office because of like some scathing music review that I wrote, and they, Russell Simmons called up and said like, LL Cool J is crying. Whoever this writer is a horrible, mean person. And so those were like really funny moments for the entire staff, but it was indicative of the time. And so when it comes to mentorship, half of the times that I felt the most motivated was because of the opposition. So it was kind of like you can in some ways have the haters be your mentors by telling you all of the things that you can't do, shouldn't do, won't do, and then you force yourself to step up to match that challenge. I would say that the same way, well, I also think that like it pays to just seek out the people that you want to know more about because they either model the way that you want to hold yourself. Seek them out, because more than likely mentorship kind of works in both directions. So I've learned so much from people who are much younger than me, but much more technically advanced. When I started blogging, I really didn't know what I was doing, but there were so many kids on the internet that were so adept at it, and I needed to learn from them. So on the one hand, I had a different status because of where I was working, but when it came to blogging, I was still down bottom, and I had to learn from people who also wanted to get in the door of the building that I was in. And I think that if you see it as a two-way street, you're offering something up, they're offering something down. Nobody is better than the other, and it becomes like a real symbiotic relationship.
Now, you've talked about being in your industry, making sure that you know your stuff, and essentially breaking barriers. But I noted that you were assigned, different albums to review, this, that, or the other, and maybe not so much mentorship, but perhaps there were advocates who saw how much you knew your stuff, how tight you were. They're like, I don't care if they're this, that, or the other, they're that good, and we're going to put their name behind her. Is that something that came to your thinking in terms of strategizing how you wanted to get where you were, or did that kind of just fall in place for you as a result of knowing your stuff?
Well, so much about life and where you end up is luck. Luck, and then also the wherewithal to jump through the door as soon as it opens, or if you see a little opening, slide through. I think that what you're talking about is usefulness. So in any position that you're in, how useful, how indispensable are you? And I think that in those situations where I would get an assignment, the plum assignment, like, okay, just to put it into perspective, when Nas's Illmatic came out, he was by far the most talked about, most hyped
His best rapper alive.
People were just losing their shit about him, and there was so much mystery and so much hype. So to be able to review his first album was like a really big deal. And why would it go to this like intern, this little girl who sits in the corner of the office and gets coffee? But the point was that at the same time, I was already the person who was listening to all of the radio stations until 3 o'clock in the morning and making recordings and reporting back, and just really being that person on the street, so that somebody who was an editor could just sit back, get all the information, and sort of live off of that. And I think that by becoming indispensable, you then open yourself up to more opportunity. I think the other part of that is you have to be really careful about your diet. You are what you eat. And I think that one thing that I want to say to, and I say this to all young people, is if you want to become a better writer, read better writing all the time and different writing. And I think that this is one reason why being at a place like Poly is so important, because if you don't read classics, then you can't interpret moderns, right? If you don't listen to all different kinds of music, you really actually have no context to put today's newest hot banger, right? Like you can't describe it because you don't have the words. So for a lot of it, it is taking advantage of opportunity, knocking on doors, being the person who's indispensable, and also being the person who is constantly feeding themselves with not just the things that you agree with. You know, I truly believe in, you know, like learning what the other side is saying, but also just really a diverse diet. Feed your brain with like good food.
On that point, Armin, what advice would you give poly students as they consider the next steps? A takeaway, if you will, that you would want to leave them with them.
You know, especially now with how tough this year has been, you know, I think it's just really, really important for you students to realize this has got to be the toughest thing you've ever been through in your life. No question about it. And we'll get through it. Take the time to try to understand what life's about now. You have a lot of extra time, and there's a lot of potential complaining. I hear it a lot in my house, and you know, I do it too. Try to keep yourself level-headed. Try to understand yourself better. Try to keep busy. I think that's really helpful to be able to do that. Keep your mind moving. Try to be kinder. I have become a lot kinder because I realize a lot more people were just kind of much more on edge because we're not sure when the dust is going to settle. You know, I can say as a physician, I think it's probably in the next few months. But there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's really fantastic. And so these new vaccines coming out are really great. I'm going to take the vaccine as soon as it comes out. I'm really confident that it'll be great. It'll be helpful. And overall, we're going to be better because we're going to be much more resilient. Pursue whatever passion it is you want. If there's ever an example of how life can be short, enjoy what you can, stay focused. You know, this is a very unusual time. So it's just important to try to take that time you've got, I think, with your family and your close friends and get deep about what really matters to you. Because now's the time to slow down a little bit and figure yourself out. And because when it comes out and we can get back to normal, we're going to be going at super fast pace. No question about it. Absolutely. And I'm happy to help in any way I can to guide.
With that, I would love to open the floor to questions from our guests. Feel free to unmute yourself, or if you feel more comfortable, send your question to the chat, and we'll be happy to ask our guests questions.
So can I try? We stood in line all 3 days for 2 hours each, and I was like,
I have a question for Armin.
Please.
Can you share with us any specific success stories or athletes that you've worked with that have gotten back on the court or field or anything like that?
I can't give you their names because of a HIPAA privacy violation. What I can tell you is, after having taken care of a few, I say to myself, man, the grass is always greener on the other side. Because while people at the height of their game and the height of their career, you know, they're different in terms of how they think. They're different in terms of what access they have, what their expectations are. And there's a lot of drama that I got to deal with. At the same time, I love overcoming the challenge of getting them to trust me and know that I'm the honest broker. So no matter what their team wants, what their coaches want, what their owners want, what their agents want, it's what's best for them. And so in terms of their bodies. And I say, well, you got to do this in order to be able to achieve that. It's a two-way street. And that's the way it is in any negotiation, I would say, of any person that you're dealing with. I bring what I bring to the table. You bring what you bring to the table. If you can stick with this and do what I'm suggesting, you'll do well. If you don't, you won't do well. I can't promise you that I fix your torn ACL and anything you do in your life afterwards, good or bad, and it's never going to tear again. It might if you play the same sport. But if you do these kinds of things, we can try to get you back to 100%. And I think, that's a good metaphor for negotiations that people have in life. What do you bring to the table? Are you willing to work together on making sure that the result is great? And I think that's very helpful in being able to get the outcomes that I get with the patients I treat, whether they're pro athletes or not. And I'll tell you, I'll take the non-pro athlete over the pro athlete any day. Any day.
Please.
Dr. Tehrany, can you at least tell us one thing that all of the super high level bodies are taking? Like, what is the one vitamin, the one power?
I got news for you, Minya.
No,
it ain't no vitamin. It ain't no. I mean, listen. Do I think that eventually? This is controversial. Do I think eventually the steroid use will get to a level where it can be controlled better and it can be done better so that it's safe? Probably. But the problem is, if you give it to those athletes, the kids are going to want to take it, and the kids don't know how to take it right. And they don't know how to be careful with it. It's not just the fact that that people in the audience think that that they're cheating. It's not just that. It's that the kids are going to want to do exactly what the pros do. Meanwhile, a lot of the pros who succeed, it's not because of those things. It's genetics. It's their will. It's how hard they work. That's really what gets many of them, at least the athletes that I see, to get to where they are. Focus.
So don't take the glucosamine?
Nope. Waste of time.
Questions for our guests.
Hi, I have a question. Hello, everyone. My name is Jake. I'm a Poly Class of 15 alum. Thank you to both of our speakers and to the organizers tonight. I'm loving the conversation we're having. I'm wondering if either of you have experienced feelings of self-doubt or inadequacy throughout your journey. I'm sure that once the evident success starts to set in, even still, you can have feelings of just imposter syndrome and worry that you don't belong in the spaces that you're occupying. I'm wondering if that's ever come up for you all in your professional journeys and how you've sort of conquered some of those feelings. Any self-help strategies you have, ways of leading into community care, anything you can offer would be super interesting for me.
Minya, can I take that? Because I have tons of self-doubt that I'm happy to share.
You go first, please.
Happy to share.
Both of you, please.
So Jake, Jake? Thanks. Great question. The more of an expert I become in whatever it is I'm doing, the more humbled I am about how little I know. Really. I mean, there's so much, for example, within orthopedics, I do the knee and the shoulder, and within that I do arthroscopic work. So it's a really small niche. People are different. You go across things, you find out, wow, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. And sometimes I feel as though I could have done better. There's these other guys or other women who do this better than me. And maybe I'm not so accomplished. Maybe it's not so great. All I can do what I've learned is all I can do is just try to be real and just, and make it clear that nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. So listen, I do the best I can, and I'm learning to say, no, nothing's going to be perfect. No surgery is ever going to go 100%. No business deal in the arts is going to go perfectly. There's risk involved. I'll tell you what I do. I become more humble and more willing to say, this is what I know. Can I promise you that this is going to happen to you? I can't, but this is what I've learned. Yes, the way to overcome that, I think, is to have more humility and understand that we're not experts. We have more experience. Can we call ourselves experts? Sure, with the understanding that that doesn't mean we're perfect. This isn't math, right? This is art. This is human beings trying to make this work and get along and achieve and accomplish and enjoy each other's successes. So yeah, I have self-doubt all the time. And to be honest, now that I'm okay with it, and it took a long time for me to get to be okay with it, it helps to have others say, thank you for what you've done. It's helpful to get positive reinforcement that, hey, you helped me and I'm grateful. Then after some time goes by, I got to start to say, okay, maybe this is deserved. Okay, so that's okay, but time goes by and changes can happen. So, I think ultimately it's important for me to share that I've been able to feel better by taking on new challenges. So, I always wanted to be in the arts. So after 15 years in practice, I got in the movie business, expecting to fail. And then I got lucky that the movie that I got involved with did well. It's not because of me. I did make some good choices. I did do the good vetting. And then when I go to the next level, the next film tanks. Okay, so it's a failure. Doesn't mean I'm a failure. And I learned from the failures. So to make myself feel better is just to say, nobody's perfect. We're all just trying the best we can. But as long as I'm trying to be authentic, I'm trying to be honest, honorable, and tell the truth to the other person about what issues I have and what areas I'm not perfect, I feel like that's the best I can do. And then I can sleep at night.
I just want to reinforce what Dr. Tehrany said about being authentic, and because that's a thing that you can't get back. So I think I will forever have imposter syndrome, and I will always be my worst critic. And I think that the only way you don't necessarily get past it, it stays with you, but to live with it is to also ask yourself these questions like, did I do no harm? And I think that by saying that I was able to help people or entertain them and not do harm in the process is something that I'm very proud of. And it kind of supersedes anything else. So the other part of it is that a lot of times, and we're starting to see it, Jake, you probably have seen it in some of the hip hop legends that we hold so high in regard, right? They are starting to struggle with living in the past and not necessarily being the same as they were. That is one thing that I learned really quickly to not do, is I don't live in the past. I don't read old clips. I don't look at my old, videos. I don't revisit those things over and over and over again, because that's all part of your journey. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of your future. If it is, it won't match up. And so being able to really think in a personal example for me, when I left the radio, the minute that you're off the radio, you're in many ways irrelevant. It's like you don't have the same currency to trade. You're not in everybody's ear the same way. And so being irrelevant could have been something that really swallowed me whole. But I replaced it with something, being a parent, being a mom. That is so fulfilling in a very different way. They're not equal. They don't replace each other, but they're just different segments of your life. So if you are able to see one thing as like, this was an incredible thing that I was so blessed to be a part of, and now this is a new thing that I'm so blessed to be a part of, and this is a new challenge that I'm so anxious and excited to take on, then even past imposter moments can kind of come and go. It's the cycle of life.
Final questions for our guests as we near the end of our time.
I had a question, or they're kind of two, but I was wondering if you guys always knew where you'd end up, and following that, did you guys do you guys have like future plans or know what you want to do in the future, or where your career will lead you?
So that's such a great question. I did have a sense when I was younger of what I wanted, but how it turned out is very different than what I expected. And so what I would impart is it's great to have the passion, and it's great to have some focus, but don't hang your hat on it needing to be that. And if your mind changes and you go in a different direction, it's not a failure in any way, shape, or form. It isn't. You're here to live your life, enjoy the things you're passionate about. And the sky's the limit, especially now in your generation, where there's a lot more access that you potentially have. It's not as rigid as it was, I think, in my generation. Did things change? Yeah. And what do I see for the next half? So I'm 50, and I look at this as my next half, post-pandemic of my life. I want to spend more time doing different things, teaching, consulting a little bit, not just what I thought I would always do, which is always practice orthopedics only, and just do that only. There's other areas I want to explore, and it's wonderful to be in a position here in New York where we can do those kinds of things and have that kind of access. And now with Zoom, and the world's much closer now. There's just so many. The sky's the limit. I mean, it's really great to be able to be okay with not doing what I thought I was going to do. So that's my advice.
I will follow up with pretty much this. I had no idea at any point where I was going. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew how I wanted to be. And so I feel like I'm thankful that I've been consistently that same person at every step, right? And so I think that that's kind of like something that you can do, because again, the speed in which things are changing is so much faster now. Like whether it's Instagram and then TikTok coming and all these things that are literally changing the landscape of how young people communicate with each other and the way that creation is shared with the world. So you don't know whether the very next month there might be yet another way of sort of like becoming whoever you are and expressing yourself. So if you were to say like, oh, well, I really want to become, a YouTube celebrity, then you would already be blocking yourself off from all of the other innovations that are coming up next. So I would, like definitely leave all of the doors open and just decide how you want to navigate those places. And then again, fortify yourself with all of the tools so that whenever that next thing comes that you really feel passionate about, you're ready. For me, I think that the thing that's really revolutionary to me has been podcasting, and how, the way that radio has changed, where there's less and less talk and it's all commercials and a little bit of music, thrown in. Radio has kind of become less relevant, but meanwhile, people are craving the connection of hearing people talking. So maybe that's something that I'll get into, or maybe I'll just enjoy them. But again, just like with you, I am leaving all of the doors open.
Thank you. To our students and poly community, can we get a round of appreciation and thanks for our two panelists for joining us and taking the time? We are truly appreciative of the two of you taking the time and imparting your stories for our poly community. I know I took a lot of things, especially on the imposter syndrome bit, but so thank you truly for sharing. We are eternally grateful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It was an honor.
Thank you, guys. It was
Take
so
care.
fun.